human mechanic, was quietly repairing his equipment until an orc warrior found something of his. There are moments in life when a single object can unravel everything you've built. A small thing, a forgotten thing, something you never meant for anyone to find. For Gareth, that moment came on a frozen battlefield, when green fingers larger than his own closed around a piece of his past he thought he'd buried forever. And the warrior who found it? She wasn't supposed to care, she wasn't supposed to understand. But Gortha did both, and in understanding, she became the one person in two warring worlds who could destroy him or save him. The snow fell heavy that winter evening, blanketing the abandoned battlefield in white silence. Gareth knelt beside his wooden toolbox, his breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. His fingers, calloused and stained with oil, worked methodically through the tangle of leather straps and iron buckles scattered before him. The battlefield was supposed to be empty. The war between humans and orcs had moved north 3 days ago, leaving behind only the ghosts of violence, shattered weapons, burnt siege equipment, and the occasional frozen corpse half buried in snow. Gareth preferred it this way. Alone, quiet, just him and the work. He was a mechanic, not a soldier. While other men his age marched with swords and shields, Gareth had chosen the path of creation over destruction. He repaired catapults, fixed wagon wheels, maintained armor. His hands built what war broke. It was honest work, solitary work, and it kept him far from the front lines where his sister Alara begged him never to go. The toolbox before him was his sanctuary. Hammers of various sizes, files, awls, coils of rope, jars of animal fat for lubricating joints, and small vials of herbal remedies for the horses. Everything had its place. Everything made sense. Unlike the chaos of battle, unlike the screaming, unlike the blood, his tools obeyed logic and reason. He reached for a particularly stubborn buckle when he heard it. A footstep, heavy, deliberate. The sound of snow crunching under weight far greater than any human could produce. Gareth's heart stopped. His hand froze halfway to the buckle. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but his body refused to obey. Slowly, with the careful precision of prey, hoping not to be noticed, he turned his head. She stood 20 paces away, an orc warrior, female, towering, easily 7 feet tall, maybe more. Her skin was the deep green of forest moss, marked with old battle scars that ran like white rivers across her powerful arms. 2 ivory tusks curved upward from her lower jaw, framing a face that was simultaneously fierce and strangely beautiful. Her black hair was pulled back in a warrior's braid, decorated with small bones and feathers. She wore armor of leather and iron, practical and battle-worn, with a massive war axe strapped across her back. But it was her eyes that held Gareth frozen. Amber eyes, intelligent, curious, not filled with the bloodlust he'd been taught all orcs possessed, but with something else entirely, something that looked almost like hesitation. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The snow continued to fall between them, soft and indifferent to the tension crackling in the air. Gareth's mind raced through his options. He had no weapon, nothing but tools meant for fixing, not fighting. Against an orc warrior, he wouldn't last 10 seconds. His only advantage was that she hadn't attacked yet. "I'm not a soldier," Gareth said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "Just a mechanic. I'm just collecting my tools." The orc tilted her head slightly, studying him with those unsettling amber eyes. When she spoke, her voice was deep and rough, accented heavily but understandable. "You are far from your people, mechanic." "So are you," Gareth replied before he could stop himself. A flicker of something crossed her face. Amusement? Respect? It vanished too quickly to tell. She took a step forward, and Gareth flinched, despite himself. The movement made her pause, and for a brief second, he saw something that looked like regret in her expression. "I am Gortha," she said, "daughter of Thalgrim, chieftain of the Ironjaw clan. I am here because I tracked deserters from my father's warband. They fled this way after the last battle." "I haven't seen anyone," Gareth said quickly. "I've been alone since sunrise." Gortha nodded slowly, her gaze drifting to the toolbox at his feet. "You fix things," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes. Catapults, armor, wheels, anything that breaks. We have word for this in my tongue. Grokthar, maker of things whole." She spoke the orc word with reverence, as if it held more weight than any human translation could carry. In my clan, the Grokthar are valued. They keep weapons sharp, armor strong. They are not warriors, but without them, warriors cannot fight. Gareth blinked, caught off guard by the respect in her voice. Everything he'd been taught about orcs said they valued only strength, only killing. But here was this massive warrior speaking about mechanics, about fixers, with genuine appreciation. Your people value this? He asked carefully. My people value those who serve the clan with skill, Gortha said. A warrior who cannot wield his axe is worthless, but a maker who keeps that axe sharp, he ensures many victories. She paused, then added, Your people do not understand this. They see only the warrior, not the hands that made the warrior strong. There was criticism in her words, but not cruelty, just observation. Gareth found himself nodding despite himself. Most soldiers look through me like I'm invisible, he admitted, until something breaks. Then suddenly I'm the most important man in camp. This I understand, Gortha said, and something in her tone suggested she truly did. The moment stretched between them, strange and unprecedented. A human and an orc, enemies by birth, speaking to each other like ordinary people on an abandoned battlefield. It should have been impossible. It should have been terrifying. And yet Gareth felt something shift in the air between them. Not friendship exactly, but the faint possibility that maybe, just maybe, the monsters he'd been taught to fear weren't quite as monstrous as he'd believed. Gortha's eyes drifted back to his toolbox, and Gareth saw her gaze catch on something. Her expression changed. The careful neutrality vanished, replaced by sharp curiosity. Before he could react, she moved forward with startling speed for someone her size, and her massive hand reached down into his toolbox. Wait! Gareth started, but it was too late. Gortha's green fingers, each nearly twice the thickness of his own, closed around something small and lifted it into the light. Gareth's blood turned to ice. His stomach dropped. Every muscle in his body went rigid with pure, primal fear. Because Gortha wasn't holding a tool. She was holding a small, carved wooden figure, a tiny sculpture no bigger than her palm, delicate and detailed, showing two figures embracing. One human, one orc. Their faces were turned toward each other, foreheads touching, in a pose of impossible tenderness. Gareth had carved it 3 months ago, in a moment of weakness and longing he'd never dared to name. He'd meant to burn it, to destroy the evidence of thoughts he wasn't supposed to have. But he'd hidden it instead, buried it beneath hammers and rope where no one would ever think to look. Until now, Gortha held the carving up to the dying light, turning it slowly in her massive hand. Her expression was unreadable. The silence stretched so long that Gareth thought his heart might actually stop beating. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. You made this? Gareth couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Couldn't do anything but watch as his entire world balanced on the edge of a knife. If she told anyone, if word got back to the human armies that their mechanic carved romantic images of humans and orcs together, he'd be branded a traitor, exiled, maybe executed, and if word reached her clan, her people would see it as an insult, a mockery, a human daring to imagine intimacy with their kind. Answer me, mechanic. Gortha's voice was harder now, commanding. Did you carve this? Yes, Gareth whispered. The word felt like signing his own death warrant. Gortha stared at the carving for a long time. Her thumb traced the delicate curve of the orc figure's face, with a gentleness that seemed impossible for someone so large, so built for violence. When she looked back at Gareth, her amber eyes held something he couldn't quite name. Why? She asked simply. Gareth swallowed hard. 1,000 lies rushed through his mind. He could say it was just practice, just idle carving to pass the time, meaningless artistic nonsense. But something about the way Gortha looked at him, the weight of her gaze, made lying feel worse than the truth. Because I wonder, he said finally, his voice shaking. I wonder if all the hatred, all the war, all the killing, I wonder if it has to be that way. I wonder if things could be different, if we could be different. Different, Gortha repeated, as if tasting the word. You wonder if a human and an orc could stand together without blood between them. Yes. You wonder if they could care for each other. Yes. You wonder if they could... She paused, her fingers tightening slightly around the carving. Love. The word hung in the frozen air between them like a confession. Gareth wanted to look away, wanted to deny it, wanted to take back everything he'd just admitted, but he didn't. He met Gortha's eyes and nodded once. Gortha was quiet for so long that Gareth began to mentally prepare for violence. Her grip on the carving could crush it to splinters in seconds. Her axe could cleave him in half before he took 3 steps, but she did neither. Instead, very carefully, she lowered herself to one knee in the snow. The movement brought her face closer to his level, though she was still taller even kneeling. Up close, Gareth could see details he'd missed before, the small scars on her cheeks, the way her tusks had been carved with intricate patterns, the intelligence burning in those amber eyes. "I have something to tell you, Gareth the mechanic," she said quietly, "and if you speak of it to anyone, I will hunt you across every battlefield between here and the northern wastes. Do you understand?" Gareth nodded, his throat too tight to speak. Gortha reached into a pouch at her belt and pulled something out. For a moment, Gareth couldn't process what he was seeing. Then his mind caught up, and his breath left him in a rush. It was a piece of cloth, human cloth, a torn fragment of a blue tunic embroidered along the edge with yellow thread in the pattern of wheat stalks. It was old, stained with dirt and faded from sun, but carefully preserved, and folded inside it was a small pressed flower, a human wildflower that grew only in the meadows south of the human settlements. "I took this from a dead soldier after a battle," Gortha said softly. 6 moons ago, he wore it over his heart. I do not know why I kept it. I should have left it with his body, should have let him take it to whatever afterlife your people believe in. But I didn't. I kept it, and sometimes when I am alone in my tent at night, I take it out and I wonder." "What do you wonder?" Gareth asked, his voice barely audible. Gortha's eyes met his, and in them, Gareth saw the same fear, the same longing, the same impossible hope that had driven him to carve that tiny wooden figure. "I wonder if the human who embroidered these wheat stalks loved the soldier who wore them," Gortha said. "I wonder if she kissed him goodbye before he marched to war. I wonder if she wept when he did not return. And I wonder," her voice dropped even lower, "I wonder if she could have loved me instead. If the world were different, if I were not born with green skin and tusks, if she could have seen past what I am, to who I am." The confession hung between them, raw and vulnerable, and utterly terrifying in its honesty. Gareth stared at this massive orc warrior, this daughter of a chieftain, this woman who could snap him like a twig, and saw himself reflected in her eyes. 2 people from opposite sides of an endless war, both carrying secret dreams of a world that didn't exist, both wondering the same impossible question. "What if?" "I see you, Gortha," Gareth said quietly. "I see who you are." Gortha's breath hitched slightly. For just a moment, her fierce warrior's mask cracked, and Gareth saw something achingly vulnerable underneath. Then she carefully, reverently, placed his wooden carving back in his toolbox and rose to her feet. The movement put distance between them again, physically and emotionally, as if she was rebuilding the walls that should exist between human and orc. "The deserters I track went north," she said, her voice formal again, controlled. "You should go south, back to your people. This battlefield is not safe after dark. There are wolves, and other things that hunt in the night." "What about you?" Gareth asked. "I continue north. I have my duty." "Gortha, do not say my name again, mechanic," she cut him off, but there was no anger in her voice. Only a deep, bone-tired sadness. "Do not make this harder than it already is. We have spoken too much, revealed too much. If anyone knew we stood here talking like this, they would call it treason. Your people would name you traitor. Mine would name me corrupted." "Is it treason?" Gareth asked. "To see someone else as human?" Gortha's laugh was bitter. "I am not human, Gareth. That is precisely the problem. You know what I mean." "Yes," she said softly. "I know what you mean. And that knowledge is dangerous for us both." She turned to leave, her massive frame cutting through the falling snow like a ship through water. But after 3 steps, she paused and looked back over her shoulder. "Keep carving, mechanic," she said. "Keep wondering. Because even if the world we wish for never comes, someone should remember that we wished for it at all." Then she was gone, disappearing into the white curtain of snow like a ghost, leaving Gareth alone on the battlefield with his tools, his secrets, and 1,000 questions that had no answers. He looked down at the wooden carving sitting in his toolbox, still slightly warm from Gortha's touch. His hands trembled as he picked it up, turning it over in his fingers the same way she had. For For the first time in his life, Gareth allowed himself to truly examine the question he'd been avoiding. What if the war ended not with victory or defeat, but with understanding? What if the boundaries between human and orc weren't as absolute as everyone claimed? What if love, real love, could exist between two people who were supposed to be enemies? And most dangerously, what if he was already halfway to finding out? The night settled over the battlefield like a dark blanket, and Gareth packed his tools with shaking hands, his mind replaying every word, every glance, every impossible moment of connection he'd just experienced. He knew he should never come back to this place, should never risk seeing her again, should bury the carving, destroy the evidence, and forget this ever happened. But even as he thought it, he knew he wouldn't, because Gortha had seen his secret and hadn't destroyed him. She'd shared her own instead, and in that exchange, something had been born that was far more dangerous than any weapon of war. Hope. The weeks that followed were torment. Gareth returned to the human camp and tried to lose himself in work, but his mind wouldn't let him rest. Every night he dreamed of amber eyes and green skin. Every morning he woke with his heart racing, remembering the way Gortha had knelt in the snow to speak to him as an equal. The way her massive fingers had handled his tiny carving with such careful reverence. The way her voice had broken slightly when she'd spoken of the embroidered cloth and the woman who might have made it. He told no one, not his sister Alara, who wrote him letters from their village begging him to stay safe, not his fellow mechanics, who complained endlessly about the cold and the orc raids, not the soldiers who passed through his workshop with broken swords and damaged shields. He carried the secret like a stone in his chest, heavy and constant and impossible to forget. 3 weeks after the battlefield encounter, word came that the orc clans were gathering for a major assault on the human fortress at Greymont. Every able-bodied soldier was being called to defend it. The mechanics, too. They would need to work around the clock to maintain the siege equipment, repair the walls, keep the defenders supplied. Gareth's hands shook as he packed his tools. Greymont was north, the same direction Gortha had gone hunting deserters, the same territory held by her father's clan, the Ironjaw. The likelihood of seeing her again was slim, but not impossible. And that possibility filled Gareth with equal parts terror and desperate longing. The journey to Greymont took 4 days by wagon. The fortress was massive, built into the side of a mountain with walls 30 feet high and gates of reinforced iron. Inside, it was chaos. Soldiers ran drills in the courtyard. Blacksmiths worked their forges day and night. Commanders shouted orders from the battlements, and everywhere the smell of fear hung thick in the air because everyone knew. When the orcs came, the battle would be brutal. Gareth set up his workshop in a corner of the fortress near the armory. His job was simple. Keep the ballistas functional, repair damaged shields, maintain the gate's pulley systems. Honest work, necessary work. Work that kept his hands busy and his mind distracted from thoughts he shouldn't be having. On the 3rd day at Greymont, a young soldier brought him a damaged piece of armor. Chainmail torn along the shoulder where an orc axe had cleaved through. The soldier was barely 18, his face still soft with youth, his hands trembling as he handed over the mail. "Can you fix it?" the boy asked. "I don't have another set. If the orcs attack tomorrow like everyone says, I'll need it." Gareth examined the damage. It was bad, but not beyond repair. "I can fix it. Come back at sunset." "Thank you." The soldier breathed, relief flooding his face. Then, hesitantly, "Is it true what they say? About the orcs? What do they say? That they're monsters, that they eat human flesh, that they feel no pain, no fear, no mercy." Gareth thought of Gortha, of the vulnerability in her amber eyes, of the pressed flower she carried, and the question she'd whispered in the snow. Could someone love me if the world were different? "They're warriors," Gareth said carefully. "Dangerous, yes, but monsters? I don't know about that." The young soldier frowned. "My brother died in an orc raid last summer. They showed him no mercy. And how much mercy do we show them?" Gareth asked quietly. "When we burn their villages? When we kill their young? War makes monsters of everyone, boy. Don't fool yourself into thinking we're innocent just because our skin isn't green." The soldier stared at him for a long moment, then left without another word. Gareth returned to his work, but his hands moved mechanically, his mind elsewhere. He knew he was treading dangerous ground, questioning the war, sympathizing with the enemy. These were thoughts that could get him killed if spoken too loudly. But Gortha had changed something in him, had opened a door he couldn't close again. That night, Unable to sleep, Gareth climbed to the fortress battlements and stared out at the dark forest beyond the walls. Somewhere out there, in those trees, the orc clans were gathering, and somewhere among them, Gortha prepared for battle. Did she think of him? Did she remember their conversation? Did she wonder, as he did, what might happen if they met again? The moon was high and bright when Gareth heard footsteps behind him. He turned to find an older soldier, gray-haired and scarred, leaning against the battlement beside him. "Couldn't sleep either?" the old soldier asked. "Too much on my mind," Gareth admitted. "That's the way of it before battle. The young ones think they're fearless, but us old-timers know better. Fear is what keeps you alive." Gareth nodded, saying nothing. "You're the mechanic, aren't you?" The soldier continued. "Fixed my son's armor today. He told me you said something odd, about the orcs not being monsters." Gareth tensed. "I said war makes monsters of everyone. Dangerous words, those. Some men would call you a sympathizer for saying them. And what would you call me?" The old soldier was quiet for a moment, his eyes distant. "I'd call you someone who's seen too much to believe in simple answers anymore. I've fought orcs for 20 years, boy. Killed more of them than I can count. And you know what I've learned?" He turned to look at Gareth directly. "They die the same as us. They bleed the same. They scream for their loved ones when they're wounded. And when you look in their eyes in that final moment before death, you see the same fear, the same pain, the same desperate wish to live that you'd see in any human soldier's eyes." "Then why do we keep fighting?" Gareth asked. "Because neither side knows how to stop. Because the hate has gone on so long that forgiveness seems impossible. Because admitting that the enemy is human as people means admitting that everything we've done to them is unforgivable." The old soldier sighed heavily. "War doesn't need monsters to be monstrous, boy. It just needs ordinary people willing to do monstrous things." They stood in silence after that, two men who'd both glimpsed the terrible truth that no one wanted to acknowledge. Eventually the old soldier patted Gareth's shoulder and left, leaving him alone on the battlements with his thoughts. The attack came at dawn. The orcs emerged from the forest like a green tide, hundreds of them, their war cries shaking the very stones of Greymont Fortress. They came with siege towers, battering rams, ladders. The human defenders responded with arrows, boiling oil, ballista bolts. The battle was immediate, brutal, and utterly chaotic. Gareth worked frantically in his workshop, repairing broken weapons as soldiers brought them back from the walls, keeping the ballistas loaded and functional, doing everything he could to support the defense. The sounds of battle were deafening, steel on steel, screaming, drums, the horrible wet sound of bodies hitting stone from great heights. Hours blurred together. Gareth lost track of time, lost track of everything except the work in front of him. Fix this sword, reload that ballista, repair this broken shield strap. Over and over, an endless cycle of destruction and repair, death and survival. It was late afternoon when a soldier stumbled into his workshop, blood streaming from a wound on his arm. "The East Gate," he gasped. "They've breached the East Gate. We need everyone who can hold a weapon." Gareth's blood turned to ice. He wasn't a fighter, had never trained with sword or spear, but the desperation in the soldier's eyes told him there was no choice. He grabbed a hammer from his toolbox, the biggest one he had, and followed the soldier toward the sounds of screaming. The scene at the East Gate was carnage. The orcs had smashed through the barrier and were pouring into the fortress courtyard. Human soldiers fought desperately to push them back, but the orcs were stronger, larger, trained for battle in ways that exceeded human capability. Gareth saw men he'd spoken to that morning cut down in seconds, saw blood painting the cobblestones, saw the young soldier whose armor he'd repaired take an axe to the chest and fall without a sound. And then, through the chaos, through the press of bodies and weapons, Gareth saw her. Gortha. She stood head and shoulders above the other orcs, her war axe cutting through human soldiers like wheat before a scythe. Her armor was splattered with blood, her face a mask of fierce concentration, her movements fluid and deadly. She was magnificent and terrifying in equal measure. A perfect weapon, a perfect warrior. Their eyes met across the battlefield. Everything seemed to stop. The noise faded. The chaos receded. For one impossible moment, it was just the two of them, staring at each other across a space filled with bodies and blood and broken dreams. Gareth saw recognition flash in Gortha's amber eyes, saw her war axe hesitate mid-swing, saw her whole body tense with a conflict that had nothing to do with the battle around them. Then a human soldier charged at her from the side, and the moment shattered. Gortha spun and cut him down without thinking, pure warrior instinct overriding everything else. But her eyes found Gareth again immediately, and in them he saw something that looked like agony. Another orc warrior, massive and scarred, shouted something in the orcish tongue. Gortha responded without looking away from Gareth, her voice sharp and commanding. The other orc argued, gesturing at the human defenders, but Gortha cut him off with a single word that carried the weight of absolute authority. Then she was moving, not toward Gareth, but toward the gate, calling orders in her language. The other orcs hesitated, confused, but they obeyed. Slowly, impossibly, they began to pull back, not retreating exactly, but reorganizing, consolidating their position at the gate rather than pushing deeper into the fortress. A human commander saw the shift and shouted orders. The defenders pressed the advantage, trying to drive the orcs back out of the gate entirely. But Gortha held her ground, her massive frame blocking the gateway like a living wall, preventing both sides from fully engaging. It was as if she was deliberately creating a stalemate, a pause in the violence. Gareth didn't understand what was happening until he saw Gortha's eyes flick to him again, then deliberately toward a side alley. The message was clear. Get out of here. Get somewhere safe. Now. He should have stayed, should have helped his people defend their fortress. But his feet were already moving, carrying him away from the battle, toward the alley Gortha had indicated. He felt like a coward, felt like a traitor, but the desperate plea he'd seen in her eyes overrode every other consideration. The alley led to a narrow space between two buildings, dark and quiet despite the battle raging nearby. Gareth pressed himself against the wall, his heart hammering, his hammer still clutched in his white-knuckled grip. He waited, not knowing what he was waiting for, barely able to breathe. 10 minutes passed. 20. The sounds of fighting continued, but seemed to be stabilizing into a standoff rather than escalating. Then he heard heavy footsteps, and Gortha emerged from the shadows. She looked even larger in the confined space of the alley, her armor making her seem almost too big to fit. Blood covered her arms and face, none of it her own. Her chest heaved with exertion, and her eyes burned with an intensity that made Gareth's knees weak. "You shouldn't be here," she said roughly. "You should be with your people." "You signaled me to come here," Gareth shot back. "I was trying to save your life, you fool. Did you think I wanted to see you cut down in front of me? To watch my own warriors kill you? Then why are you here? Why aren't you out there leading them?" Gortha's expression twisted with something between anguish and fury. "Because I saw you," she said, her voice breaking. "Because the moment I saw you standing there with that pathetic hammer, looking terrified and brave and utterly defenseless, every instinct I have screamed at me to protect you instead of kill you. And that mechanic is a betrayal of everything I am supposed to be." The confession hung between them, raw and devastating. Gareth stared at her, at this massive warrior who'd just admitted that seeing him had broken something fundamental in her loyalty to her people. "I didn't ask you to protect me," Gareth said quietly. "No, you didn't. You just existed. You just stood there being yourself, being the person who carved that impossible dream in wood and carried it like hope in your toolbox. And that was enough to make me question everything." Gortha's hands clenched into fists at her sides. "Do you understand what you've done to me? What this feeling does? I am a warrior. My entire life is built on strength, on loyalty to clan, on honor in battle. But when I look at you, all of that feels hollow, empty, like I've been fighting for the wrong things my entire life." "Maybe you have been," Gareth said, his own voice shaking now. "Maybe we all have. Maybe there's something more important than war." "Don't," Gortha warned. "Don't say it. Don't give words to the thing we both know we're feeling." "Why not?" "Because words make it real. Because once we name this thing between us, we can't take it back. We can't pretend it doesn't exist." Gareth dropped his hammer. The clang of metal on stone seemed impossibly loud in the small alley. He took a step toward Gortha, his heart in his throat, terror and longing warring in his chest. "I don't want to pretend," he said. "I'm tired of pretending. I'm tired of hiding. I'm tired of living in a world where seeing you, caring about you, wanting to understand you, is somehow the greatest crime I could commit. Your people would exile you. Let them. My people would kill me. Then we leave them both behind." Gortha's breath caught. For a moment, just a moment, Gareth saw naked hope in her eyes, the possibility of a future neither of them had dared to imagine. A life outside the war, outside the hatred, where a human mechanic and an orc warrior could simply be themselves. Then reality crashed back down. "My father leads my clan," Gortha said, her voice thick with pain. "Thalgrim. He is a great chieftain, a just leader. I am his only daughter. If I run, if I abandon my people in the middle of battle, I shame him beyond redemption. I destroy his honor, his legacy. I prove to every clan that trusted him that his bloodline is weak, corrupted. And my sister," Gareth whispered, "Ilara, she's alone in our village. Our parents are dead. I'm all she has. If I disappear, if I'm branded a traitor and exile, what happens to her?" They stared at each other, the impossible weight of their responsibilities crushing the brief spark of hope before it could properly ignite. The choice was clear and terrible: each other or everyone they loved, their hearts or their honor. The sounds of battle shifted. A horn blew, deep and resonant. The orc called to retreat. "I have to go," Gortha said, agony written across her face. "If I don't return now, questions will be asked. Suspicions will be raised. When will I see you again? You shouldn't. We shouldn't. This needs to end before we both do something unforgivable." "It's already unforgivable," Gareth said. "We already care. We already feel what we're not supposed to feel. Running from it now won't change that." Gortha closed her eyes, her jaw clenched tight. When she opened them again, they were wet with tears she refused to let fall. "3 nights from now," she said quietly, "there is an old shrine in the forest, 2 miles northeast of this fortress. Human-made, long abandoned. If the ancestors are merciful, I will find a way to meet you there. But Gareth," her voice broke on his name, "if I don't come, you must promise me you'll forget this. Forget me. Live your life. Find a human woman who can give you everything I never could. I can't promise that. Then promise me you'll try." Before Gareth could respond, Gortha turned and disappeared back into the shadows, moving with the silent grace of a predator despite her size. Within seconds she was gone, leaving Gareth alone in the alley with his racing heart and the terrible certainty that 3 nights from now his entire world would change forever. The battle ended with neither side claiming victory. The orcs retreated to the forest. The humans held the fortress. Both sides counted their dead and prepared for the next engagement. It was the way of war, endless, grinding, accomplishing nothing except filling graves. Gareth went through the motions over the next 2 days, fixed weapons, repaired armor, spoke to soldiers who asked his advice. But his mind was elsewhere, counting down hours until the meeting at the shrine. He knew he was being reckless, knew that leaving the fortress at night to meet an orc warrior was the height of foolishness. But the pull was too strong. The need to see her, to be near her, overrode every logical objection his mind could produce. On the 3rd night, he waited until the camp was quiet, then slipped out through a small maintenance door in the fortress wall that only the mechanics knew about. The forest was dark and cold, the path treacherous, but he moved with purpose. 2 miles northeast, an old shrine. She'd be there. She had to be there. He found the shrine after an hour of walking, a small stone structure, crumbling with age, dedicated to some forgotten human god. Vines covered the walls. The altar inside was thick with dust, but it was dry and sheltered, and when Gareth entered, his breath fogging in the cold air, he saw that someone had already arrived. Gortha sat on the floor near the altar, her war axe leaning against the wall. She'd removed her armor, wearing only simple leather tunic and pants. Without the battle gear, she looked different, not less powerful, but more accessible, more like a person and less like a weapon. She looked up when he entered, and the relief that flooded her face was so profound it made Gareth's chest ache. "You came," she said. "Did you think I wouldn't?" "I hoped, but I didn't let myself believe." Gareth moved closer, settling on the floor across from her. The space between them felt charged, electric, full of things they'd both been too afraid to say. Up close, in the dim moonlight filtering through the shrine's broken roof, Gareth could see details he'd never noticed before. The small tattoos on Gortha's arms, tribal markings in black ink, the way her tusks had been carved with patterns that must have taken hours of painstaking work. The silver rings in her ears, each one representing something significant in her culture. "Tell me about those," Gareth said, gesturing to the tattoos. Gortha looked down at her arms, surprised. "These? They're clan markings. Each one represents a stage of my life. This one. She touched a spiral on her right forearm. I received when I completed my first hunt. I was 12. I tracked a winter elk for 3 days through snow. And this one? Gareth pointed to a set of crossed axes on her shoulder. First kill in battle. 16 years old. A human soldier. Her voice was flat, factual. He was young, maybe your age. I remember his eyes when he saw me coming. Pure terror. I've never forgotten it. Do you regret it? I regret that it was necessary, but I don't regret surviving. That's the difference between warriors and murderers, Gareth. Warriors kill because they must. Murderers kill because they want to. Gareth absorbed this, thinking of all the human soldiers he'd seen who took pleasure in orc deaths, who boasted about their kills like trophies. Not all warriors respect that line, he said quietly. No, Gortha agreed. Not all. Silence settled between them, not uncomfortable, but heavy with unspoken things. Finally, Gareth asked the question that had been burning in his mind since the battlefield. What happens now? Between us? Gortha's expression was pained. I don't know. Nothing about this makes sense. You're human. I'm orc. Our people are at war. Any relationship between us is impossible by every definition that exists. And yet here we are. And yet here we are, she echoed, sitting in an abandoned shrine, talking like old friends, feeling things that could get us both killed. She looked at him directly, her amber eyes intense. I should hate you, Gareth. Every lesson I've ever learned says you are the enemy. Your people have killed my cousins, my uncles, my friends. I've seen human soldiers burn orc children alive. I've watched your armies salt our fields and poison our wells. By every right, I should want you dead. But you don't, Gareth said softly. But I don't. Gortha's voice broke slightly. Instead, I think about you constantly. I wonder what you're doing. If you're safe, if you think of me the way I think of you, I imagine what it would be like to hold your hand, even though my fingers are twice the size of yours. I imagine hearing you laugh, really laugh at something I said. I imagine... She trailed off, looking away. What? Gareth pressed. What do you imagine? I imagine a life, Gortha whispered. A life where none of the rest of it matters. Where we could be together without shame, without hiding, without fear. I imagine waking up next to you, working beside you, growing old with you. And the terrible thing, Gareth, the absolutely devastating thing, is that I can see it so clearly, every detail, every moment, as if somewhere, in some other world, that life actually exists. And we're living it, and we're happy. Tears were streaming down Gareth's face now, hot against his cold cheeks. I see it too, he said. I see us in a small house, maybe near a forest. You're teaching me about orc metalwork, showing me techniques your people have perfected. I'm teaching you about crop rotation, about human agriculture. We're learning from each other. We're building something new. Something that belongs to neither of your worlds, but both of them simultaneously. Gortha reached out, and her massive hand engulfed Gareth's completely. The size difference was startling, comical almost, but also strangely right. Her palm was rough with calluses, warm despite the cold night air. She held his hand like it was made of glass, terrified of breaking it with her strength. This is dangerous, she said. I know. If we continue down this path, there's no going back. I know. We could lose everything. Our families, our homes, maybe even our lives. I know. Gortha's thumb traced small circles on the back of Gareth's hand, the gesture achingly tender. And knowing all of that, you still want this? You still want me? Gareth met her eyes, saw the vulnerability there, the fear of rejection that mirrored his own. I've never wanted anything more in my entire life, he said. The distance between them evaporated. Gareth didn't remember moving, and neither did Gortha, but suddenly they were close enough to breathe each other's air. Gortha's free hand came up to cup Gareth's face, and her palm covered nearly his entire cheek and jaw. She was so gentle, so careful, treating him like something precious instead of something fragile. I've never done this before, she admitted quietly. Never felt this. Never wanted someone the way I want you. Neither have I, Gareth said. We're making this up as we go. Maybe that's how it's supposed to be. Gortha smiled then, a real smile that transformed her entire face. Without the warrior's mask, she was beautiful in a way Gareth had never associated with beauty before. Strong and fierce and utterly captivating. Their foreheads touched, just like the carved figures in Gareth's toolbox. The gesture felt sacred, ancient, as if they were recreating something that had been done countless times before in countless forbidden moments throughout history. They stayed like that for a long time, just breathing together, existing together, silently promising things they couldn't say aloud. When they finally pulled apart, the sky outside was beginning to lighten with the approaching dawn. "I have to go back," Gortha said reluctantly, "before I'm missed. When can I see you again?" "I don't know. The battle isn't over. My father's planning another assault within the week." Gareth's stomach clenched. "Will you be there? In the assault?" "I'm his daughter, his finest warrior. Of course I'll be there. Then I'll be there too, on the other side, fighting to keep you out." The reality of it settled over them like a shroud. This wasn't a fairy tale. This was war. And the next time they met, it might be as enemies across a battlefield, with weapons instead of words. "Promise me something," Gortha said urgently. "If we meet in battle, if we're forced to fight each other, you won't hesitate. You'll defend yourself with everything you have. Don't die for me, Gareth. Don't sacrifice yourself trying to spare me." "How can you ask me that?" "Because I'm asking you to survive. I'm asking you to live long enough that someday, maybe, when this war finally ends, we'll have a chance. But if you die trying to protect me in battle, that chance dies with you." Gareth wanted to argue, wanted to say that he could never raise a weapon against her. But the fierce determination in her eyes stopped him. She was right. She was a warrior, and she understood something about survival that he, a mechanic, never had to learn. Staying alive wasn't betrayal. It was hope. "I promise," he said finally. "I'll survive, for both of us." Gortha kissed his forehead, a gesture so tender it made Gareth's heart crack. Then she stood, retrieving her war axe and armor, transforming back into the warrior the world expected her to be. "No matter what happens," she said from the doorway of the shrine, "know that you changed me, Gareth. You made me believe that the world could be different. That's worth more than you know." Then she was gone, melting into the pre-dawn darkness like a dream. Gareth sat alone in the abandoned shrine, his hand still warm from her touch, and wondered how he was supposed to go back to his old life when everything inside him had fundamentally shifted. The next assault came 5 days later, just as Gortha had warned. It was even more brutal than the first, with both sides throwing everything they had into the battle. Gareth worked until his hands bled, repairing weapons as fast as he could, trying not to think about Gortha out there in the chaos, trying not to imagine her falling, trying not to count the orc bodies being carried out of the fortress and wonder if one of them was her. But she survived. He knew because he glimpsed her twice during the fighting, once leading a charge against the western wall, and once pulling her own wounded warriors back from a human counterattack. Each time their eyes met briefly, and in those glances Gareth saw everything they couldn't say. "Stay alive. Be safe. I'm still here." The battle ended in another stalemate, and that night, Gareth found a small cloth bundle tucked into his workshop, hidden among his tools where only he would find it. Inside was a small carved tusk, no bigger than his thumb, inscribed with orcish symbols he couldn't read, and wrapped around it was a lock of black hair, tied with a thin leather cord. Gortha's hair. Gareth clutched it to his chest and wept. The war continued for 3 more months. 3 months of sporadic battles, skirmishes, raids. 3 months of stolen moments at the shrine, when both of them could slip away unnoticed. 3 months of falling deeper and deeper into something that had no name in either of their languages, but felt more real than anything else in their lives. They learned each other during those meetings. Gortha taught Gareth words in the orcish tongue, laughing at his terrible pronunciation. Gareth showed her how to read human script, his finger guiding hers across the letters he'd scratched in the dirt. They shared stories of their childhoods, their families, their dreams. Gortha spoke of her mother, dead in childbirth with a brother who never took a breath. Gareth spoke of his parents, lost to sickness when he was 14, leaving him and Alara alone. They were careful, so careful, never stayed too long, never left evidence, never spoke to anyone else about what they were doing, but Gareth knew that secrets like theirs couldn't stay hidden forever. Someone would notice, someone would wonder. The breaking point came on a cold autumn night. Gareth was in his workshop late, repairing a damaged crossbow, when he heard footsteps. Heavy, military footsteps. A commander entered, followed by 2 soldiers. The look on the commander's face made Gareth's blood run cold. "Gareth the mechanic," the commander said formally. "You are accused of consorting with the enemy. Treason against the human kingdoms. What say you to these charges?" Gareth's world stopped. His mouth went dry. His hands gripped the crossbow so hard his knuckles went white. "I don't know what you're talking about," he managed. "Don't insult my intelligence," the commander said coldly. "You've been seen leaving the fortress at night. Always in the same direction. Always toward the old shrine. We sent scouts. They found evidence of 2 people meeting there regularly. 1 human, 1 orc, based on the footprints. That doesn't mean we found this in your toolbox." The commander threw something on the workbench. The carved tusk. Gortha's gift. "That's mine," Gareth said desperately. "I carved it. It's just art. The symbols on it are orcish," the commander said. "Our scholars confirmed it. It's a love token, mechanic, given from an orc to a lover. So I'll ask you again. What say you to these charges?" Gareth's mind raced. He could deny it. Could claim he found the tusk on the battlefield. That he'd never met an orc peacefully. That this was all a misunderstanding. But looking at the commander's face, at the soldiers' disgusted expressions, he knew it wouldn't matter. They'd already decided he was guilty. Already decided his fate. So Gareth did the only thing he could think of. He told the truth. "Yes," he said quietly. "I've been meeting an orc. Her name is Gortha. She's the daughter of Chieftain Thalgrim. And yes, we care for each other. We're trying to find a way to end this war, to build bridges between our peoples. Is that treason? Or is that the bravest thing anyone's done in this entire pointless conflict?" The commander's face turned purple with rage. "You dare! I dare speak the truth!" Gareth shouted, all his fear transforming into desperate courage. "This war is killing us all, humans and orcs both. We've been fighting for so long that nobody even remembers why it started. We just keep killing each other because we're too proud, too stubborn, too hateful to imagine another way. Well, Gortha and I found another way. We chose to see each other as people instead of monsters. And if that's treason, then I'm guilty." Silence filled the workshop. The soldiers looked uncertain. The commander's jaw worked soundlessly. Then, very quietly, the commander said, "Take him to the cells. At dawn, he'll be tried and executed as a traitor." The soldiers grabbed Gareth roughly. He didn't resist. What was the point? As they dragged him toward the dungeons, his last thought was of Gortha. Would she come to the shrine tomorrow night and find him missing? Would she know what happened? Would she mourn him? The cell was small, dark, freezing. They left him there without food or water, just him and the rats and his racing thoughts. Hours passed. Gareth lost track of time in the darkness. He thought about his sister Alara, about how devastated she'd be to learn he'd been executed as a traitor. He thought about all the weapons he'd fixed, all the soldiers he'd helped, all the years of loyal service that meant nothing now because he'd committed the unforgivable sin of loving someone from the wrong side. He thought about Gortha. Around what must have been midnight, Gareth heard something, a sound from outside the fortress walls, distant at first, then growing louder. Drums, Orcish war drums, and voices chanting in a language Gareth had learned to recognize if not fully understand. Then, impossibly, an explosion. The entire fortress shook. Stone dust rained from the ceiling of his cell. Screams erupted from somewhere above. The sound of battle, real battle, not a raid but a full assault, filled the night air. Footsteps ran past his cell, soldiers shouting. Orders being called. Chaos. Then his cell door exploded inward, torn from its hinges by strength that couldn't be human. And there, silhouetted in the doorway with her war axe in hand and fury burning in her amber eyes, stood Gortha. "Are you hurt?" she demanded, her eyes scanning him frantically. "Gortha, what? How did you—" "I have spies in the human camp," she said, already working on his chains with brutal efficiency. "They told me you were arrested, told me you'd be executed at dawn. Did you think I would let that happen? You attacked the fortress. You brought your entire clan." "I brought 3 clans," Gortha corrected, "including my father's. I told them we were launching a surprise assault. They don't know the real reason." The chains broke. She grabbed Gareth's arm, her grip firm but careful. "Can you run?" "Gortha, this is madness. You can't." "I can and I did. Now run." They ran, through corridors filled with fighting, past human soldiers too busy defending the walls to notice one mechanic being pulled along by an orc warrior. through a breach in the eastern wall where orc siege equipment had smashed through, and finally into the forest beyond, where 3 horses waited, held by an orc Gareth recognized from the battlefield. "This is Mokra," Gortha said quickly. "My cousin. She's the only one who knows the truth. She'll help us." Mokra, a female orc even larger than Gortha, looked Gareth up and down with obvious skepticism. "This is what you're betraying the clan for? This tiny human? This tiny human is worth more than all the honor in all the clans combined." Gortha shot back. "Now give us the horses before my father realizes I'm gone." They rode hard into the night, leaving the sounds of battle behind them. Gareth clung to Gortha's back as she controlled the horse with expert precision, and gradually, the truth of what had just happened sank in. Gortha had attacked her own clan's assault plan, had used her father's military campaign as cover to rescue Gareth, had committed the ultimate betrayal of her people. For him, they rode for hours until the forest gave way to rocky hills, and the hills gave way to mountains Gareth had never seen before. Finally, when the horses were exhausted and the sun was beginning to rise, Gortha called a halt near a small cave hidden behind a waterfall. "We'll rest here," she said, dismounting. "Mokra, take the horses back. Tell my father. Tell him I died in the assault. Tell him I was crushed by falling stone or caught by human arrows. Make him believe it." Mokra's expression was pained. "He'll demand to see your body. Then fake one. Burn it beyond recognition. Use whatever orc body you can find. Just make him believe I'm dead, Mokra. Please. He can't know I chose this. It would destroy him." Mokra looked between Gortha and Gareth for a long moment. Then she sighed heavily. "You realize this is the most foolish thing anyone has ever done in the entire history of our people." "I know." "And you're willing to give up everything? Your father? Your clan? Your entire future? For him?" Gortha looked at Gareth, and the love in her eyes was so clear, so absolute, that even Mokra softened. "Yes, for him, I'd give up the world." Mokra shook her head, but she was smiling slightly. "Then you're either the bravest warrior I've ever met, or the biggest fool. Possibly both." She mounted her horse, leading the other 2 away. "May the ancestors watch over you, cousin. You're going to need it." Then she was gone, leaving Gareth and Gortha alone in the mountains, with nothing but each other and the clothes on their backs. They stood in silence for a moment, the magnitude of what they'd just done settling over them. Gortha had lost her father, her clan, her entire identity. Gareth had lost his home, his reputation, probably his sister's respect if she ever learned the truth. They were outcasts now, exiles, traitors to both their peoples. And somehow, despite everything, Gareth had never felt more free. "What happens now?" he asked quietly. Gortha looked out at the sunrise painting the mountains gold and red. "Now we build something new, a life that belongs to us. Not to the war, not to our peoples, just us. They'll hunt us, probably. We'll never be able to go home. I know. We'll be alone. We'll have each other." Gareth moved to stand beside her, and her arm wrapped around his shoulders, pulling him close. The size difference that had once seemed so strange now felt perfect, like 2 pieces of a puzzle that shouldn't fit, but somehow did. "I love you," Gareth said. The words felt inadequate, too small to contain everything he felt, but they were all he had. Gortha's breath hitched. She turned to look down at him, her amber eyes swimming with tears. "In my language," she said softly, "we say Dranosh. It means heart of my heart. It's what we say to someone we would die for, someone we would live for, someone who makes us whole." "Dranosh," Gareth repeated carefully. Gortha smiled through her tears. "Dranosh," she agreed. They stood together watching the sunrise, 2 impossible people who'd found each other across a battlefield and chosen love over hate, hope over despair, together over everything else. The world would call them traitors. Their peoples would hunt them. History would forget them. But in that moment, none of it mattered, because they had each other. And sometimes, just sometimes, that was enough. The weeks that followed were hard, harder than either of them anticipated. They moved constantly, never staying in one place long, always watching for scouts from either side. They lived off what they could hunt and gather, supplementing with occasional trades in remote villages where people were too desperate for goods to ask questions about a human and an orc traveling together. Gareth taught Gortha to fish. Gortha taught Gareth to track. They learned each other's skills, blending human knowledge with orc tradition, creating something unique that belonged to neither culture, but both. In the evenings, they would sit by their small campfire and talk for hours. Gortha told stories of the great orc heroes, of battles fought before Gareth's grandparents were born. Gareth recited poetry he'd learned as a child, making Gortha laugh at the flowery human language. They had their difficulties, cultural differences that seemed small but loomed large. Gortha's directness, which Gareth sometimes interpreted as harshness. Gareth's tendency to hint instead of say, which frustrated Gortha to no end. The way they processed emotions differently, Gortha internalizing, Gareth externalizing, but they worked through it. Every misunderstanding became an opportunity to learn. Every conflict became a chance to grow closer. 2 months into their exile, they found a small valley hidden deep in the mountains. It was isolated, beautiful, with a stream running through it and enough flat land to farm. They built a small cabin there, working together. Gortha provided the strength to move heavy logs. Gareth provided the precision to fit them together perfectly. The result was something neither could have created alone: a home. One evening, as they sat on the porch of their new cabin watching the sun set over the mountains, Gortha said, "Do you ever regret it? Giving up your old life?" Gareth thought about his sister, Alara, thought about the familiar comfort of his workshop, the pride he'd felt when he'd fixed something particularly difficult, thought about the human world he'd left behind. "Sometimes I miss certain things," he admitted. "I miss Alara. I miss the smell of the forge. I miss knowing my place in the world. But I wouldn't change what we did. This," he gestured at the cabin, at her, at everything they'd built. "This is worth more than all of that. You're worth more than all of that." Gortha pulled him close, and they sat together in comfortable silence. After a while, she said, "Mokra visited me in my dreams last night. The ancestors sometimes allow such communication when the need is great." Gareth sat up, startled. "What did she say?" "My father believes I'm dead. He held a proper funeral, burned my war axe, mourned as any chieftain would mourn his only child. Mokra says he's different now, quieter, less interested in the war. She thinks losing me changed something in him." "I'm sorry," Gareth said quietly. "Don't be. It's better this way. Better he mourns me dead than knows I betrayed him." But there was pain in her voice, deep and raw. "Mokra also said the war is ending. Both sides are exhausted. They're talking about a treaty, about peace." Gareth's heart leaped. Peace? Real peace? It seems so. Without my father's passion for battle, the orc clans lost their strongest leader, and the humans lost too many soldiers, too much gold, for too little gain. They're both ready to stop. That's good news, isn't it? "It is." Gortha looked at him. "It means maybe someday we could go back, not to our old lives, but to our peoples. As ambassadors, perhaps. Proof that humans and orcs can coexist, that love between us is possible. Would you want that?" "Part of me would. Part of me wants my father to know I'm alive, that I'm happy, that the choice I made led to something beautiful. But another part," she trailed off, "wants to stay hidden." Gareth finished. "Stay safe, just the two of us." "Yes." They sat with the question, neither pushing for an answer. They had time. For the first time in either of their lives, they had time. That winter, their first in the valley, was hard. The snow fell heavy and the cold bit deep. But they had each other, and they had shelter, and they had hope. Gareth spent his days carving, not just the tiny figures anymore, but larger works, tables, chairs, beautiful things that made their cabin feel like a home. Gortha hunted, bringing back game that kept them fed through the lean months. And at night, they would lie together beside the fire, and Gortha would trace the lines of Gareth's face with her massive fingers, memorizing every detail, and Gareth would press his small hand against her chest, feeling the strong, steady beat of her heart, and marvel that he was allowed to be this close to something so fierce, so powerful, so impossibly beautiful. Spring came, and with it, an unexpected visitor. Gareth was working in the garden they'd started when he heard Gortha call out in her language. He looked up to see her standing at the edge of the clearing, and approaching her was Mokra, leading a single horse. Fear shot through Gareth. Had someone discovered them? Were they being hunted? But Mokra dismounted peacefully, and the way she and Gortha embraced suggested this was no hostile visit. Gareth approached cautiously, and Mokra gave him a nod that might have been respect. "Dranosh?" She greeted him in Orcish, using Gortha's term of endearment deliberately. You still live? Impressive. Mokra brings news, Gortha said, switching to the common tongue for Gareth's benefit. Tell him. Mokra settled on a log, accepting the water Gortha offered. The war is officially over, she said. The peace treaty was signed 3 weeks ago. Both sides agreed to honor it. Gareth's legs went weak with relief. It's really over? The fighting is, the hatred. That'll take longer to heal. Mokra looked between them. But there's something else. The treaty included provisions for reconciliation, cultural exchanges, humans teaching orcs farming techniques, orcs teaching humans metalwork. The idea is to build understanding. That's wonderful, Gareth said. It is, and it's partly because of you two. They stared at her. What do you mean? Gortha asked. Your father, Gortha. After your death, he became obsessed with understanding humans, trying to figure out what had made his daughter value a human enough to die protecting him. Because that's the story I told, that you died defending a human mechanic from your own warriors who wanted to kill him for helping the wounded. Gortha's eyes went wide. You told him, not the whole truth, but enough that he saw you as a hero, not a traitor. And that heroism, that willingness to see humans as worth protecting, it changed him. He pushed for the peace treaty. He argued for the cultural exchanges. In a way, you dying for your human love made it possible for real peace to happen. The weight of it settled over Gareth and Gortha. They'd thought their sacrifice was personal, private, but it had rippled outward, touching the very course of history. There's more, Mokra continued. The treaty includes provisions for mixed communities, places where humans and orcs can live together, work together. They're looking for volunteers to help establish these communities, people who can bridge the gap. Gortha looked at Gareth. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? That we could help, Gareth said slowly. That we could use what we've learned here, living together, to teach others. You'd have to reveal yourselves, Mokra warned. Reveal that you're both alive, that you've been living together. It would be complicated. Complicated how? Gareth asked. Your people would have questions about why you vanished. Gortha's father would have to confront the fact that his daughter let him mourn her while she lived. There would be anger, confusion, maybe accusations of treason, though with the peace treaty in place, actual prosecution would be difficult. Gortha stood, pacing. If we do this, if we come forward, there's no going back. We give up our privacy, our safety. We become symbols instead of just people. But we could make a difference, Gareth argued. We could help build the world we always wished existed. We could also make things worse. What if humans see us and think orcs are trying to seduce and corrupt them? What if orcs see us and think I've betrayed our values? Or, Mokra said quietly, they could see two people who love each other. Who chose understanding over hate? Who proved that the old boundaries don't have to be permanent? She stood. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just bringing information. You two decide what feels right. She left shortly after, refusing their invitation to stay, saying she needed to get back before she was missed. After she was gone, Gareth and Gortha spent the rest of the day in silence, each wrestling with the impossible choice before them. That evening, Gortha broke the silence. What does your heart tell you, Gareth? That I'm terrified, he admitted, but also that we didn't survive everything we've survived just to hide forever. We have knowledge, experience, proof that humans and orcs can build something beautiful together. If there's even a chance we could help others find what we found. He trailed off. You want to go back? Part of me does. The part that always believed fixing things was worthwhile. That making broken things whole again mattered. He looked at her. But only if you want it to. I won't ask you to face your father, to face your clan, if you're not ready. Gortha was quiet for a long time. Then, my father mourned me. He changed because of that mourning. If he learns I'm alive, it could undo all that growth. Or it could complete it, Gareth suggested. Show him that his daughter didn't die for nothing, that she lived to help build the peace he's working toward. That's optimistic. I'm a mechanic. I have to believe broken things can be fixed. Gortha laughed despite herself. Then she pulled Gareth into her arms, holding him close. If we do this, she said, we do it together, every step. I won't let you face your people alone, and you won't let me face mine alone. Agreed? Agreed. They spent the next week preparing. Gareth carved a gift for his sister, a small box with their family crest on the lid, filled with flowers from their valley. Gortha prepared a formal speech in Orcish, the kind given by warriors returning from great quests. They practiced their story, deciding what to share and what to keep private. Finally, they were ready. They packed their few belongings, took one last look at the cabin they'd built together, and began the long journey back to civilization. The first human settlement they reached was a small farming village. The reaction to seeing them together was immediate: shock, fear, weapons being raised. But Gareth spoke calmly, explained who they were, mentioned the peace treaty. The village elder, a woman who'd lost 2 sons to the war, listened with a hard expression. "You're asking us to believe a human and an orc can love each other," she said flatly. "I'm not asking you to believe anything," Gareth replied. "I'm just telling you the truth." The elder studied them for a long moment. Then, "Show me your hands." Confused, Gareth and Gortha both extended their hands. The elder looked at them. Gareth's small, scarred from tools and work. Gortha's massive, scarred from battle and survival. Then the elder took both their hands and placed them together, Gortha's engulfing Gareth's completely. "They fit," the elder said quietly. "Different sizes, different shapes, but they fit. Maybe that's all peace is, finding ways to fit together despite our differences." She let them stay the night. In the morning, word had spread, and people came from neighboring farms to see the impossible couple. Some were hostile, some were curious, but a very few, looked at Gareth and Gortha with something like hope. The journey to the first mixed community took 3 weeks. When they arrived, they found humans and orcs living side by side, but with clear tension. Separate housing, separate work areas, cooperation, but not connection. Gareth and Gortha changed that simply by existing, by holding hands in public, by laughing together, by working together on projects that required both human precision and orc strength. Slowly, very slowly, others began to follow their example. A human woman asked an orc to teach her child to carve. An orc man asked a human to explain crop rotation. It was small, it was slow, but it was real. 6 months into their public life, Gortha received word that her father wanted to meet her. The message came through Mokra, who looked worried. "He knows you're alive," she said. "He knows you've been living with a human. I can't read him, Gortha. He might embrace you. He might challenge you to combat for the dishonor. I honestly don't know." Gortha's jaw set with determination. "Then I'll find out." The meeting was arranged in neutral territory, a clearing between the orc lands and the human settlements. Thalgrim came alone, as agreed. He was massive, even for an orc chieftain, with gray streaking his black hair and more scars than Gortha remembered. He looked older, tired. When he saw Gortha approaching with Gareth beside her, his expression was unreadable. They stood 3 paces apart, father and daughter, separated by months of lies and an unbridgeable cultural gap. "Father," Gortha said formally in Orcish, "I have dishonored you. I ask no forgiveness. I expect no mercy. I simply wanted you to know. I live, and I am not sorry for the choice I made." Thalgrim's eyes moved to Gareth, studying him with the intensity of a warrior assessing an opponent. Gareth forced himself to stand tall, to meet that amber gaze, even though every instinct screamed at him to run. "This human," Thalgrim said in heavily accented common tongue. "This is worth my daughter's honor, worth her clan, worth her future." Before Gortha could answer, Gareth spoke. "With respect, chieftain, your daughter's honor didn't die when she chose me. It grew. She taught me strength. I taught her gentleness. Together we built something neither could have built alone. If that's not honorable, then I don't understand honor." Thalgrim's expression darkened. Gortha tensed, ready to defend Gareth if needed. Then, impossibly, the old chieftain laughed. It was a rough sound, rusty from disuse, but genuine. "Brave words from someone so small," Thalgrim said. "Foolish words, perhaps, but brave." He looked at Gortha. "You taught him this courage?" "He had it already," Gortha said. "I just gave him reason to use it." Thalgrim was quiet for a long time. Then he stepped forward and placed his massive hand on Gortha's shoulder. "I mourned you, daughter. I burned your war axe and wept like a child. It was the darkest time of my life. I know, father, I'm sorry. Let me finish." His grip tightened slightly. "I mourned you, and in mourning, I changed. I questioned the war, questioned our endless fighting, questioned whether strength was enough. When I learned you had died protecting a human, it broke something in me. Made me see humans as people, not just enemies. He looked at Gareth again. Now I learn you did not die. You ran. You chose love over duty. Yes, Gortha said simply. And I am forced to ask myself, is that not the greatest kind of courage? To choose the harder path? To risk everything for something you believe in? Tears streamed down Gortha's face. Father, Thalgrim pulled her into a crushing embrace. I am angry you lied. I am hurt you let me mourn. But I am proud, so proud that my daughter had the courage to choose her own path, even if that path led away from me. Gareth watched them, his own tears falling freely now, and felt a weight he hadn't known he was carrying finally lift. It wasn't perfect. There would be orcs who couldn't accept Gortha's choice, humans who couldn't accept his. But they had this moment, this acceptance, this proof that love could bridge even the widest gaps. When Thalgrim finally released Gortha, he turned to Gareth. You, human, what is your name? Gareth, sir. Gareth. You protect my daughter, with my life, even though she could crush you with one hand. Especially because of that. Thalgrim's lips twitched. Good answer. He pulled something from his belt, a small knife in a worn leather sheath. This was my father's, and his father's before him. I give it to you now to seal a blood oath. You are family, Gareth, not by birth, but by choice. And choice, I am learning, can be stronger than blood. Gareth accepted the knife with shaking hands, understanding the enormity of what was being offered. A chieftain's family blade, given to a human. It was unprecedented. Thank you, he whispered. Don't thank me yet, Thalgrim said, but he was smiling. Family means responsibility. You'll be expected to visit, to endure my stories, to let me teach your children the old ways. Children? Gortha laughed. Father, we can't. Humans and orcs can't have children. Thalgrim interrupted. No, but they can adopt. They can mentor. They can create family through choice, just as you have. He gestured around the clearing. Look at this world we're building. Mixed communities, humans and orcs learning from each other. It needs parents, Gortha. It needs people who can teach the next generation how to live together. Who better than you two? The idea settled over them, unexpected and beautiful. They couldn't have biological children, but they could build a family. They could take in orphans from both sides of the war, children who'd lost everything, and give them a home where human and orc were equally valued. That's... Gareth couldn't finish the sentence. Perfect, Gortha completed. That's perfect. That night they camped with Thalgrim, and he told them stories of Gortha's childhood that made her blush and Gareth laugh. He spoke of his own doubts during the war, his secret moments of wondering if they were fighting for the right reasons. He admitted he'd always known, deep down, that orcs and humans weren't so different. They just needed someone brave enough to prove it. You two are that proof, he said as the fire burned low. Every day you're together you prove the old hatreds are wrong. Never forget how important that is. Over the years that followed, Gareth and Gortha became symbols of the peace. They helped establish 3 mixed communities, trained mediators for human-orc disputes, and yes, they adopted children. 7 of them over the course of 2 decades. 4 orc orphans, 3 human, all raised together in a household where differences were celebrated instead of feared. Their eldest, an orc boy named Dranosh, after Gortha's term of endearment, became the first orc to attend a human university. Their youngest, a human girl named Alara, after Gareth's sister, became the first human accepted into an orc warrior training program. Gareth eventually reconciled with his sister Alara, who wept when she learned he was alive and wept harder when she met Gortha and saw how completely they loved each other. She visited often and eventually moved to their community, finding her own happiness with an orc craftsman who shared her love of weaving. The road wasn't always easy. There were setbacks, communities that rejected them, people who called them abominations, moments of doubt where both questioned if they were doing the right thing, but they faced it together, and that made all the difference. On their 20th anniversary of the day they met on that frozen battlefield, Gareth and Gortha returned to the old shrine where they'd first confessed their feelings. It was maintained now, turned into a monument to peace, with plaques telling their story for future generations. They stood together in the same spot where they'd once sat terrified and hopeful, and looked at each other with eyes that had seen 2 decades of life, love, challenge, and growth. Do you regret it? Gortha asked, echoing her question from so many years ago. Gareth looked at her, the gray in her hair, the new scars from training accidents with their children, the laugh lines around her eyes. He thought of everything they'd built, everything they'd overcome, all the lives they'd touched. Not for a single second, he said. Gortha smiled and pulled him close, and they stood together as the sun set over a world that was still imperfect, still struggling, but undeniably better than the one they'd been born into. A world where a human and an orc could love each other openly, where children of both species could grow up together, where the old boundaries were slowly, steadily dissolving. They had done that, not alone, but they'd been the spark, and sometimes that's all it takes. One small spark of hope in a world of darkness, one impossible love that refuses to be denied, one choice to see the person instead of the monster. In the end, that was their legacy. Not peace, because peace is fragile and ongoing. Not harmony, because harmony requires constant work, but possibility. The simple, profound possibility that things could be different, that love could win, that bridges could be built across any divide, if only people were brave enough to try. And as Gareth and Gortha grew old together, surrounded by their impossible family and the community they'd helped create, they knew they had been brave enough. They had tried. And they had won something far more valuable than any battlefield victory. They had won each other. And through each other, they had helped change the world. If you're listening to this story and feeling moved by Gareth and Gortha's journey, I want you to know, their story isn't just fantasy. It's a mirror. In your own life, there are people you've been taught to fear, to hate, to see as enemies. People across political divides, cultural boundaries, religious differences. And somewhere in that divide, there's the possibility of connection, of understanding, of love. It won't be easy. Gortha and Gareth gave up everything for their love. They faced rejection, exile, constant struggle. But they also found something most people spend their entire lives searching for. A connection so deep, so true, that it made every sacrifice worthwhile. So I challenge you. Look at the person you've been taught to see as other. Ask yourself if maybe, just maybe, the boundaries between you aren't as absolute as you've been told. Ask yourself if there's a bridge waiting to be built. Because real change doesn't start with governments or laws or treaties. It starts with two people choosing to see each other as human, or in this case, as people worth loving, regardless of green skin or tusks or any other difference. Gareth and Gortha's love changed the world. Maybe yours could too. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button and join the Orcbound Tales family. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, and drop a comment telling me, have you ever had to choose between love and duty? Between your heart and your world's expectations? I want to hear your stories, your struggles, your triumphs, because that's what we do here. We tell stories that matter. Stories about love that crosses boundaries, courage that defies expectations, and hope that refuses to die. Stories that remind us all, we're more alike than we are different, and love, real love, is always worth fighting for. Until next time, remember, the bravest thing you can do is love someone the world says you shouldn't. And the second bravest thing, build a life with them anyway. This is Orcbound Tales reminding you that every impossible love story starts with one possible choice. Make yours count.